I read 8 books in the month of August. Here is what they were. The first book was A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is a small town murder mystery, Nancy Drew vibes, but follows a young girl, a teenager called Pippa Fitz-Amobi, and she's in her last year 12, I would say. I think that's what they call it in Britain, grade 12, but the last year of high school, and as part of extra credit or just I think high school in general over there, you have to complete a research social project. We had this in Australia as well if you did particular subjects where you had to complete over the year or over the summer or whatever, you had to do some research, come up with a topic that you felt strongly about, and be a journalist about it, be a researcher, be an academic about it, and write a paper about that particular topic. And Pippa chooses to write about a murder that's happened in her small town. A girl called Andy Bell, who is a few years older than Pippa, was murdered, and she wants to find out who murdered Andy Bell. There is a person that everybody says this guy is the murderer. However, Pippa doesn't believe that and just thinks there's no way that this guy, whose name was Sal Singh, could have murdered Andy Bell. She doesn't believe it and she wants to go out to prove that it's wrong. Overall, this is the author's first book. I did think it was pretty well written. It's not a bad book. There are now 4 books in the series featuring Pippa, I believe, and there's also a Netflix series about the book. It has pretty good ratings on Goodreads. I think it has over 1 million ratings and it has a 4.3 star, which is pretty solid. However, for me, this was definitely a 3-star book. There's a few things that I didn't like about the book, and these are just personal things that I don't like. When I'm reading books, it doesn't mean that it was a bad book and I wouldn't recommend you to read it. I definitely recommend that you give this book a read or a listen. In my case, I did the audiobook for this, and the audiobook was fantastic. It felt like the American Life podcast, the serial podcast that was season 1 of, which was about the murder of Heyman Lee, was her name, in Baltimore. It felt very, very similar to that. The audiobook also had sound effects and little other things going on, which made it feel like a graphic audio, like you were watching the TV show. And I really recommend, if you're looking for an easy listen on audiobook while you do your work or other things, this is a good one. But ultimately, the reason why I gave this book a 3 stars is a few things that I don't like about books. The first was the female main character was sometimes really annoying. I don't like when the plot is built or furthered by the main character not telling people things, like miscommunication or lack of communication. I feel like that's a really weak way to kind of further the plot. And I think this is really common in young adult books or teenager books where they don't tell people of authority what's going on, which kind of holds them back. But sometimes even she wouldn't tell people she was working with in the book what was going on. And she just made really dumb decisions that were sometimes a little bit out of character for her to make. Dumb decisions in a book for me is okay because we all make dumb decisions, but the silly decisions for her in this book were just so out of character. Sometimes also I felt like the book was a little repetitive and you could have cut out maybe 25% of the book, really edited it down, and I think you still would have had a solid ending. It was overall a really great book. I would recommend if you're new to murder mysteries, that you give this a read. A great book. However, if maybe you're a more experienced murder mystery reader, you probably will not enjoy this. I'm not going to go ahead and read the rest of the books in the series unless I really run out of something to read, but it was a good book just to read on its own, but I won't be reading it any further. The next book that I read was Final Offer by Lauren Asher, and I did a mix of reading this physical book and also listening to the audio. This is the 3rd book in the Dreamland Billionaire series. The Dreamland Billionaire series can be all read separately. You don't have to read them as a trilogy. However, I think it's nice to kind of read them as a trilogy. They do have small bits that build upon each other, but nothing that if you just picked up Final Offer first, you would not understand. However, the ending of Final Offer, I believe, really concludes the trilogy as a whole. So if you read Final Offer, you're the first two books are going to be spoiled a little bit for you. Well, the main trope in this, I would say it's a billionaire romance, but don't want to say the other tropes in this because it might spoil some plot points in the book for you. But it follows the youngest brother, whose name is Callahan or Cal. The female main character is Alana. Cal and Alana, way back like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, used to date, so it's a second chance romance. And now Cal has to sell the house that Alana is living in. It's part of the will that his grandfather has left and like tasks that he has left. And it kind of just follows that story. I will mention one of the triggers in this book is addiction. So if you don't like reading about that, this book is a definite skip. I gave this book a 3 out of 5 stars. It was a very, very, very entertaining read. It's probably not my favorite out of all the books, but still a really entertaining read. However, some plot things that I didn't love is that I didn't love how they treated his addiction. And I also don't want to speak too much about this because it's not something that I have personally ever dealt with. I've never been alongside someone who's dealt with it and like secondhand have to deal with it. So I can't 100% have I'm not the thought leader on this. However, sometimes it felt like in the book, the way that they treated his addiction was kind of an inconvenience, that his addiction was an inconvenience, and I just didn't like that narrative around it. I felt like it was maybe too deep of a topic for the author to handle in a book like this, and maybe it didn't feel like she did it 100% justice, and it was just too heavy for a book like this. There just needed to be other things that were talked about or dealt with, or other things that we saw in this book to feel like this book dealt with addiction truly. And I feel like the author kind of wanted to have a heavy topic in the book, but didn't 100% want to dive into it. That's just my personal opinion on it. Also, I did feel like it was a little bit too long. It could have been a little shorter, sometimes repetitive. Sometimes I was like, why did we have this chapter? Why did we have this moment? Why could we not have skipped past this? It really could have been condensed a little bit. And sometimes you were like, why? It's a second chance romance, and I feel like they just kind of like for them to be falling in love again or getting back together again, it just happened too fast. It just happened without like resolution to the previous issues, and it just happened because both of them were really horny. And where's the plot? Still recommend that you give the entire Dreamland Billionaire series a read if you enjoy billionaire romances and you're looking for a romance read. However, would I ever read this again? No. Did I enjoy the series as a whole? Yes. Would I recommend it? Yes. Did I think that there was serious plot lacking in this series? Yes. Did I enjoy the books? Yes. Next book that I read was Twisted Lies by Anna Huang. This is the final book in her Twisted series. It follows Stella and Christian Harper. Basically, Stella is a fashion intern, fashion assistant at a magazine or a fashion company or something. And she's also a influencer. I believe she wants to be like a content creator, like full-time, take her blog full-time, and she has further aspirations in fashion. And Christian is a millionaire owner of a securities company. He also owns the apartment building that Stella lives in, and that's how they kind of begin their interaction. It is another billionaire romance series, and I gave this a 3.5 stars or 3 stars out of 5. This was maybe my second or third favorite book in the Twisted series. My first favorite book in the Twisted series was Twisted Games. I think the one with Bridget and Reese, that was my favorite. I forget what it's called, but that was for sure my favorite one out of all of them. I loved that book, and I feel like this one kind of like was lacking. It gave sometimes a little nothing, and maybe just a little bit too long. We know that Stella has a stalker very early on in the series. Like I think in the first book, Twisted Love, we know that Stella has a stalker, so that's not a spoiler. However, I just felt like that stalker storyline, I wish it was just like more prominent. I wish more things happened with that and it was intertwined with the romance. But it just kind of felt like, first it was like the male main character was like, I don't like her, I really like her. I can't keep my hands off her. And then bang, like we just went into straight on, spicy scenes. and it really just jumped. And for a book to be this long and me feeling like that, I feel some kind of way. I think it's a still good book to read. I read it, I listened to it on audiobook again, and if that was just like nice to kind of do work, it's not that serious, and just kind of get through a day. I would recommend, if you enjoy billionaire romance series, that you give the Twisted series a listen, that you read Twisted Lies. However, it's not a book that I would recommend if you don't enjoy billionaire romances, if that makes sense. I would still recommend, if you don't enjoy fantasy romance, that you give ACOTAR a read. I would still recommend, if you don't enjoy fantasy, that you would read Harry Potter. However, if you don't enjoy billionaire romances, I would say just, it's not worth it. You skip. Overall, I did enjoy the Twisted series quite a lot. I just felt like some of the book lacked proper plot sometimes, but you can definitely tell that the author's writing has gotten so much better from the first book to this one. The next book we read was a nonfiction book. It was Atomic Habits by James Clear, and this was, I think, my first 5-star read for the month. I highly enjoyed this book. It is my first time reading a book in this genre also, so I think in the genre, I should say, of like books about being productive and having good habits. My first book in that genre, so I always feel like the very first book that you read in a genre really sets your standards and always going to be a highlight for you, because anything that comes after this gets compared to this, and if it taught you anything new, if it had anything new, if it was exciting, etc. And when you're reading a topic for the first time, it's always going to be the most revolutionary, the most exciting thing ever. So I really enjoyed this book. I think if you are looking to change your habits, there's some great pointers in here that you can pick up on. It is very, very easy to read. I listened to this again as an audiobook. It's only a 5-hour audiobook, because when I tried to read it, it was so boring for me. But the audiobook is really, really good. It is narrated by the author of the book, James Clear. And it took me like a good month, like all month, to finish this book, even though it's only 5 hours long. But you listen to it, you let it sit with you, you apply what the book is telling you, and then you can move on to the next chapter. But it really was an amazing read. I highly recommend you give it a go. I can definitely see why people love this book so much. However, if you've read a lot of self-help, productivity books, you're very much in that world, you do podcasts, you do blog posts and all of that, some of it might feel a little rehashed to you, might feel a little repetitive. The next book that I read, and this was my first 1-star read for the month, but this is 5 a.m. Club. This was such a waste of time. This is one of those books that I finally understood like what people mean by like stop reading hyped things on social media. This book is so hyped on social media, and I truly believe people who read this book on social media and give it 5 stars have not read the book or have not read any other book, in fiction or non-fiction. This book could have been one blog post. This is a prime example of this book. Could have been a blog post. It could have been an email. It could have been a text message. I wouldn't even count. I'm so enraged by the book, that the fact that this book exists, that people recommend this book, that this book is allowed to be spoken. Like, I feel like people should. I truly despise this book because of how much of personal time that it wasted for me. I read this book on my 75 Hard challenge, and with 75 Hard, when you start a book, you have to finish the book before you move on to the next book. So this book was torture. The fact that I had to finish this book and I could not DNF it was torture. But it is basically how to wake up at 5 a.m., why 5 a.m. waking up is the best thing ever, but it goes about talking about it in such a long-winded way that I was so angry, you guys. I was so angry. I have bookmarked a few of them, a few pages here, and it's honestly just like some feel-good quotes. But imagine you're reading a nonfiction book and you come across a line like this. "Gnarly, man," the billionaire remarked. "Now that's faith and confidence in one's potential." The billionaire ran a fist along his tanned chin, looking down at the white sand for a moment. Like, why? Why do you need to describe that? Just give me a little bit of tidbit. Like, no one will believe in our ability to do great things until we first believe in our greatness. And now back it up with some journal articles, some research. that's what we need. It's really, really poorly written. I highly recommend that you skip this. If you're looking for a book about like how to have a better morning, how to wake up earlier, I preferred the book The Miracle Morning. It's still a little long-winded. However, a lot of the stuff that he does say sometimes is backed a little bit by research, and just an easier, more digestible, less annoying, less one to gouge your own eyes out and eat it kind of way. This is seriously one of the worst books ever written. I don't often say that. I don't often hate on books this hard. I really don't, because I think some books are for some people. It's just not for me. But I feel like this book is for no one. And I really, truly, please don't waste your time and read it. Do not buy this book. Next book that we read is Getting Things Done by David Allen. This was, again, a 1-star book for me. The main reason I didn't enjoy it is because I just felt like it was a little bit outdated. I thought it was going to be a book about productivity, but it was more about a book about being organized so you can be productive. So it really talked about how you can organize some of your tasks so you can waste less time and be more productive, stop putting things off. Good read, didn't need to be this long. Again, I feel like a lot of these books don't need to be this long. It can really be like a blog post, maybe 2 blog posts, or maybe a series, and you're good. I know this is still a fan favorite for so many people, but just for me, it just felt like it was a little outdated, especially someone who works in the digital world. I work a lot online, we work remotely, and things like having a filing cabinet to put away your memos was maybe just a little bit too outdated for me, but still good concepts and things that you can take away from the book, such as the 2-minute rule, which is if it takes you less than 2 minutes to do something, just do it then and there, don't delay it, which is something that I actually put into practice now. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, okay, I need to feed the fish. However, I'll just do it in like a little bit. Let me just finish this. However, it's going to take me less than 2 minutes to do it. Just do it then and there, and we're done. It's something that I do apply, but a lot of the book also you can't really apply, and it can be a little bit outdated, and overall could have been shrunk down to a quarter of the size of this book. Last book that I read for the month was Ruthless, Vows by Rebecca Ross. I gave this book a 3 stars, and I know this is such a fan favorite, and this was just a personal opinion of mine. Other than the last 2 books that I talked about, this rating is just a personal opinion of mine. I just didn't connect with the characters. I just wasn't in love. I just wasn't in love with the characters, with the story, and I think it might be because I'm just not a duologies girly. I think I like my trilogies. I feel like I don't connect with characters when it is a duology. The world building in this fell a little bit flat for me. Like I mentioned when I read the first book in the series, this is the second book in the Letters of Enchantment series. The first book with Divine Rivals, I didn't understand the world building, I would say, at all. I just thought they were living in an ordinary world until this gods thing was thrown at us, and then I really thought the female main character was imagining this gods like happening, and then you kind of learn more about it, and to me it just fell really flat. It felt really anticlimactic. It just was missing. It was just missing something. I still recommend, if you enjoy like lighter fantasy, not so deep into things, that you give this a read. People say like if you enjoy ACOTAR, read this, but I don't think so. I don't think if you enjoyed ACOTAR, if you enjoyed Fourth Wing, if you enjoyed Blood and Ash, if you enjoyed Spark of the Everflame, I don't know if this book would be for you. I think this book will be a little bit too light. I feel like this book is more for you if you enjoy books like Legends and Lattes, which is like cozy fantasies. This is probably like a little step up from that, like little higher stakes, a little step up from that. However, I don't think this is for high level, not meaning like extremely advanced or extremely intelligent, but just like not for romantasy readers, especially of those. If you like Fourth Wing, like I said, Fourth Wing, ACOTAR, Spark of the Everflame, Blood and Ash, yeah, this is gonna fall, I think, a little flat for you. Not only in the romance aspect, but also really in the fantasy aspect of it. Oh, there is one more book that I read. I don't have it here because I read it on my Kindle and I don't have the physical copy of it. It is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King. It is the second book in the Crowns of Nyaxia series. Yeah, something like that. Series. And that again, how much did I rate that book actually? Oh, that was a 4-star read for me. So one of the better books for the month. However, the reason why it didn't hit 5 stars, and it's not one of my favorite fantasy series, is that I just didn't connect with Rain and Araya, the main characters in the book, as much as I did some of the other books. I felt like, especially the second book, Araya's personality had really changed. She went from this like revengeful, badass, violent almost character in book 1 to like kind of like a softer, meeker version in book 2. I felt like she forgave the male main character too quickly, or just because she was horny, is what I'm going to say. And lots of people say like the male main character's betrayal was not significant enough for her to continue to be pissed. But if the male main character did what he did, like to me in real life, I'd be pissed for a really long time. Like anyway, but that's just my personal kind of feelings toward it. I still really like the series. I would not be picking up the rest of the series at all. I also didn't enjoy the novella in between book 1 and book 2. Lots of people say it's amazing, it's the best thing, but I didn't get the hype. I didn't understand why we had to read it. I didn't understand why it was there. I didn't really feel like I knew the backstory of the characters in book 2 that were in the novella. However, if you just totally skip it, I didn't really see what harm that could have done. Personal opinion, still would recommend that you give the book a read if you were into romantasy. If you enjoy fantasy books, if you like vampires, but it's definitely not my top favorite romantasy series. It's not my favorites. It's not in my favorites, yeah. And I wouldn't be continuing the series, or I also would be a little bit hesitant in picking up more books by the same author. Not saying she's a bad writer, not saying that the book was badly written or anything like that, just particularly not for me. If you liked her writing in the series Crowns of Nyaxia, go ahead, read her other books. But just personally for me, I didn't enjoy it, so I wouldn't continue with her work as of right now when I have so many books to try and get through. The last portion is I want to talk about what I plan to read for the coming month. The first book is Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas. This is part of her Throne of Glass series. I've already read Assassin's Blade. I'm about halfway through Throne of Glass right now. I'm really, really enjoying it. I know people say it can be a little bit boring, but I really love it. And I know people also say that her writing in it is not as good. That's probably true. Her writing in it is not as clean and not as advanced. There's things that irk me in it, but part of it also not being too advanced, the nice thing about it is that it's really easy to read. Like, you're not trying to make sense of things. Whatever you see on the paper is like what it is. It's not complicated. It's not long-winded. It's just, you can tell, like, it's just like solid writing for like a first book for an author. That's what it feels like. And I really quite am enjoying reading Throne of Glass. The second book that I have in my TBR for the month is The Mountain Is You by Brianna West. Is that the one? I think so. But I'm reading this for 75 Hard. It's probably going to be my last book for 75 Hard. So far, I'm not really enjoying the book, but it is on my goals list to finish it. The third book is the last book in the Flesh and Fire series by Jennifer L. Armentrout. I've read the first 3 books in the series already, and the 4th book has come out August like 13th or something, but I was so busy trying to finish all of these books that I didn't quite get around to it, but that is something I want to finish off in September. 4th book is Once Upon a Broken Heart. It's a trilogy series by Stephanie Garber, and I have the Kindle version on my Kindle. I have the ebook on my Kindle. So that is something that I want to get through this month, and hoping to get through the series this month or next month as well. The next 2 books that I have on my TBR for the month of September is Funny Story and Beach Read by Emily Henry. I've read 1 Emily Henry book so far, Book Lovers, and I absolutely loved it. So I do want to move through some of her other work, and sometimes in the month you just need like a light, feel-good kind of read, and that's what Emily Henry is for me. The last book is something that is from my physical TBR, and that is A Man Called Ove. I've had this on my physical TBR for the longest time, and it's time I get through it. I'm trying to slowly work my way through my physical TBR. It's not as bad as a lot of other people that you might see online. However, for me, it's still quite bad, and it's like that balance between reading books. Like, I bought this book maybe a year ago, and maybe it was like the hot thing then, or maybe it still is like the hot thing, but this is why I no longer will buy physical books, because sometimes you buy like 5 physical books that you're all in the mood to read, and you get to the 4th one and then you buy another 5 books, and that 5th one you didn't read, it becomes like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, and you're no longer in the mood to read it, and there's all these new books that have been released or all these new things you want to read. Mainly, I've stopped buying a lot of physical books. I usually do like Kindle Unlimited, Libby, which is a app where if you have a library card, you like put your library card on and then you get access to all of the ebooks at your library on your phone. And usually I do audiobooks and ebooks that way. So I use Kindle Unlimited, Libby, and then if I really want to, I'll buy the Kindle version, the ebook version of a particular book that I want to read. And then out of all of these 3, the first 2 methods being free, like Kindle Unlimited, I guess, is kind of free, and like actually buying the ebook, if I really, really, really enjoyed the book and it's something that I want to probably reread or just want to support the author because I enjoyed it so much, then I'll go ahead and I'll buy the physical copy of the book. But I've stopped altogether buying physical copies of books, thinking that, oh, I'm going to read this. I will just read it on my Kindle, and then if I need to have the physical copy, I'll have the physical copy, because having books that I have not read really, really, really irks me. And for me, I get so embarrassed when somebody says like, oh, how did you like this book? And I have to be like, oh, I didn't read this. Oh, I didn't read this. No, I haven't read this either. Like, they're like, so wait, have you read all of the books on your bookshelf? I want to be able to say like, heck yeah, I've read every single book on my bookshelf. Not like all this portion, these 100 books I haven't read. But right now I think my TBR is 10, 12 physical books in the fiction section, and then maybe like 20 or 30 in nonfiction. My nonfiction section is pretty bad. I was really into like the rhythm of reading nonfiction with 75 Hard, and I think after reading Robin Sharma's 5 a.m. Club, and then what was the other one? Getting Things Done by David Allen, and those were such flops, I'm kind of like out of my nonfiction reading era, and I just don't want to look at a nonfiction book for a really long time. But that is everything that I read in the month of September, a total of 8 books, and then I think I have 7 on my TBR. I probably will do like 1 or 2 minus that, but I'm hoping all of the books that I've mentioned is what I do finish in September, plus maybe 1 or 2 here and there. If you enjoyed this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't yet, subscribe. If you haven't seen my unfinished reading book vlog where I read a chunk of these books over a course of 4 days, I think you're really going to enjoy that, so go and check that out. If not, you'll also enjoy this vlog, and I'll see you next time. Bye!